Hey guys, so last video, I talked about percent, and I talked about showing a percent as a single number with a percent symbol right after it. I also talked about how a percent is a fraction out of 100, and I talked about a percent as a decimal number with two decimal places after the decimal because it's out of 100, so those are the hundredth. So today we're talking about representing percent as in a diagram or a number line, and I also want to talk about friendly percent. So before I talk about representing in a diagram or a number line, I want to talk about friendly percents, and here's where you really have to think back to when we talked about fractions, and I talked about friendly fractions, and we talked about it. I said how many people can picture a half, how many people can picture a quarter, and lots of you raised your hand, and percents are really similar. Okay, when you talk about, oh, I ate 50% of the sandwich, you know that that's half of your sandwich. Okay, a friendly percent is where you already kind of know in your head how much the amount of the percent is. Okay, so most of us can picture 1% of something, knowing it's really, really small. Or the opposite, 99% of something, knowing it's almost all of something. Okay, so I've listed a few of the friendly percents that I always talk of, 25%, 75%, things like that. But what I always point out when we talk about friendly percents is that if you know what 50% is, then you know what 52% is. It's 50% plus a tiny little bit more. Okay, so friendly percents really work because you know that you know what 90% would look like. It's almost all of something. Then you know what 87% is. You just take a tiny little bit away. So you can really manipulate these friendly percents to know a lot other percents too and be able to represent those in a diagram or number line. Okay, so that's really important to keep in mind, and I'm going to mention that later. So when we're talking about these figures here, they can ask you three different types of questions, and I want to go through all three different types so you understand when they come up in your assignments and you're able to answer them. So the first one is they're going to give you a blank diagram. They're going to say represent 25% of this diagram. So you're going to have to figure out that this would mean 1/4, or when we want to represent it so if they say represent 25% of this, you can write it like this. You can also write 25% as 25 hundredths, which is an equivalent fraction to 1/4. Okay, and 1/4 is really easy to draw on a diagram. You would divide it into fourths and then color in a quarter. Okay, color in a little more solid than I am, but you get the idea. Okay, so that's the first type of question. It's going to give you a blank diagram. It's going to ask you to do it. And make sure you remember your friendly percents. You can picture 25%. It's a quarter of something. Divide it into 4, color in one of them. Okay, the other one is like name what percent is already shaded here. Okay, so I have, just happens to be a quarter of it. Maybe I should have picked a different one to start off with, but here we go, the same type of question. So a quarter is colored in here, 25%. Okay, but maybe they may ask you, what is the unshaded part? And here's where, now just think back to fractions. Again, I'm going to relate it. We come with a compatible percent. We talked about compatible fractions. Two fractions, when added together, equal a whole. But in percents, this is when two percents are added together and they equal 100%, or the whole thing. Okay, so if we want to come up with a compatible fraction or a compatible percent for this, then we're going to name the unshaded part as 75%, because 75 and 25 total 100%. Okay, so those are compatible fraction or compatible percents. Okay, so if you want to do a compatible percent, you have to two percents that added together equal 100, just like compatible fractions when they total whole. Okay, the last type of question with a diagram that they're going to ask, that they could ask you, or that they could ask you, that the assignments can ask you, or that you should be able to do, is, okay, imagine that this diagram represents 50% of the figure. Draw the whole figure. Okay, so you got to think, okay, this is worth 50%, or half of the diagram, how would I draw the entire thing? Well, I have to draw half more, or this one again, because 50 plus 50 is 100. So I could draw another triangle like this. Now my diagram is 100%. Okay? If they said that this diagram is worth 25%, then I'd have to draw 3 more for it to be a full diagram. Okay? Right? If you don't understand this, I'm going to label this A, B, and C. If you don't understand what I'm talking about for any one of these, message me and we can talk about it, or I can further explain it to you, okay? Because A, B, and C, 3 types of diagram questions that you might come across when you come do percent. Okay? The last part I want to talk to you about are these lines. Now the lines work just like the diagrams, okay? Except it's a line, it's a number line, right? Except dealing with percent, okay? So the first one says, a question might ask you to divide, or to show, let's try another. Let's try 10% of this line, okay? Well, if I have to show 10% of this line, and remember that as a fraction, that's 10 out of 100, or 1/10. Okay, now we've done number lines with fractions before, okay, so you know that the denominator is how much the line is divided into, okay? So I'm going to divide this into 10 really quick, so I'm going to divide it in half, and then I'm going to divide each of these into 5, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there we go. Okay, that's not even. Okay, it's not even. Okay, but you get the idea. So now I've divided this into 10, and I'm going to show where 10% is. It's right here, because it's 1 jump out of 10. Okay, all right, and so they might ask you show 20%, which is, and so if you show 20%, okay, that's 2 jumps out of 10, then this would be 20% right here. Okay. Percents work just like fractions when it comes to number line. Okay. Last one is over here. They might give you a partial line, just like they give you a partial diagram over here. Okay. They might give you a partial line, say this is 50% of the line. Draw the whole line. Okay. Well, if this is 50%, that means that's half. I'm going to have to draw equal amount. So I measure this. Let's say it's 5 centimeters. Then I draw another 5 centimeters. Now the line is 100%. Yeah, or maybe this is 25% of the line. I'll have to draw 3 more pieces. Or this is 10% of the line. I'll have to draw 9 more pieces. Okay? You got to find out the compatible percent to draw the rest of the line. Okay? All right. So I'm going to call this D and E. All of these different types of questions. Okay? So if you are confused at all, please let me know. Say, Mrs. Vicklet, I don't understand C questions, or I don't understand how to do E. Okay, and when they come up in your assignments, let me know if you need me to help you explain these more. Okay, so we're talking about representing percents. We talked about friendly percents today. We talked about representing percents as a diagram, and we talked about representing percents in a number line. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions. Okay, we'll talk to you soon.